Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people get a little intimidated, especially when they go on places like FinTwit, because you see, these people on there with 30, 40 years of experience and everything like that. And we're seeing a pretty crazy environment, but you're one of the more well-spoken people that I've talked to on FinTwit. And yeah, exactly like you said, it's just kind of all self-taught. And you list out quite a few books on your Substack that helped you kind of get to the knowledge base that you're at, and kind of help you get that confidence. So, is there any books that you strongly recommend for somebody kind of getting started and trying to get their feet wet when it comes to investing?
Yeah, so I think that I've listed the kind of the major books that were impactful, as I mentioned, kind of those inflection points. Um, but it is important to get the basics. My academic training and some of my early career training was in more traditional securities analysis, fundamental analysis, and that is important. Things like valuations and, as Buffett would call it, the measuring machine, right? So how do you weigh things and have a proper anchoring in reality? Again, with the theme of kayfabe. So Ben Graham, the Intelligent Investor, that's his original book from the 1930s, Securities Analysis, might be a little dense for most people. So Intelligent Investor is a good place to anchor with that. Um, for me, a seminal book was Market Wizards, the original Market Wizards book by Jack Schwaber. I forget his name. I'm not good. I'm middle aged now. I've killed too many brain cells to have a great memory. But um, so that was published, I think, in 1989, and that was basically an interview book of the great traders and hedge fund managers up until that point. And I think that book's great because it teaches, or it can teach people about the importance of individuality. And I don't mean that in like a libertarian sense. I mean that there are so many different ways that the people in that book achieved the insane amount of success that they had, and there are some kind of basic underpinnings that stretch across the different people, but they all kind of did it in their own way. They all kind of had their own process and um, how they grappled with the inherent struggle that we all have, which is how we sabotage ourselves. We're all these. We're human beings making these terrible decisions based off of emotions. We're emotional animals, and that book really goes through the different ways that people like uh, uh, Bruce Kovner and Jim Rogers and just a litany of Paul Tudor Jones, I think, was in that. So that was a huge book for me. Um, and then then you get into more of the esoteric and well, I shouldn't say the esoteric. The next one I would say is Beating the Business Cycle by Eckery, and I talk about Eckery a lot because they put out a book, I think it was in the early aughts, and it basically went through their process of how they analyze business cycles. And I think that is probably the most underappreciated analytical domain um, relative to macro and investing. And I think it gets conflated with quote unquote economics, which is distinct. I think people get caught up in economics like they get caught up in politics. Are you a Keynesian? Are you a monetarist? Are you an Austrian? It's kind of like, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Or you a Green Party? Whatever. And what ECRI does, Economic Cycle Research Institute, is they just analyze the business cycle. They're more like a scientific process of that. Whereas you get into most of economics is I joke it's like political science for people who like math or are good at math. Um, so that book was important, and I started again. I was introduced to their work on thestreet.com and started following their work and subsequently subscribed to various products that they put out at different times. So I've been a long term, over 20-year devotee of their analytical framework. So that book's a way to get an introduction to how they see the world. Then a couple other books. So the other big kind of milestone that changed the way that I analyze things. I came across a book named Ubiquity by Mark Buchanan, and that was, as I joke, it was like complex systems for dummies. Um, and that's certainly me. I do not have any background in STEM. Uh, I'm more of a rocks for jocks kind of guy academically. Take the dumb science courses for athletes, so to speak. Even though I wasn't a college athlete, but so I never had like a high level physics class or a high level um, biochemistry or anything like that. So what that did is it introduced me to the basic concepts of complex systems analysis. And the next book is called How Nature Works, which is by Per Bach, which is an actual book for physicists. um, and I can slog through that. But basically, what that does is it builds out the more intellectual framework for what Buchanan covers in his book, and um, that goes back to their work in physics in the late 80s, looking at self-organizing criticality and how do complex systems actually work, the mechanics and the physics of it and the math behind it. And I started, thinking about negotiated financial markets and really humanity through that lens and how we function as this one big complex system. And when I added that to how I analyze things, that really changed. That was a paradigm shift. And that was kind of in the 2005, 2006 period. Um, so those I think are, and then the last one is related to that is Misbehavior of Markets by Benoit Mandelbrot. And Mandelbrot was the godfather of fractal geometry. And that kind of is a piece of this complex systems puzzle. um, Power law dynamics and fractals, and the way that, in my mind, the way that works is really how does price behave within the context of a complex system, and how does it manifest. So that's kind of the litany. That's a long-winded but pretty good comprehensive summation of my 25 years of an intellectual journey.